I don't think central banks are hoarding silver in the same way that they've done these gold last few years. So I would commend silver in this regard, that if it is outperforming gold without that luxury of a huge, person that has tremendous deep pockets, it really attests the silver's recent strength is real and something to respect.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin weekly specials for June 9th through June 16th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we feature 1-ounce silver maples at just $3.09 over spot. Next, backdated 1/10-ounce gold maples at just $39.99 over melt. Next, the very limited 1-ounce Silver Engelhard Prospector rounds from 1982 to 1986 are just $4.79 over spot. And finally, 1-ounce Platinum Britannia are just $79 over melt. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend Peter Grandich from Peter Grandich & Company. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure, Elijah.
Well, it's great to have you today, and I guess we're posting our interviews with each other the same day. It was great to be on your show as well just now. So, but I did want to discuss your take now on the precious metal markets as we're seeing silver. It seems like breaking out, above 36. It touched 37 yesterday. It's at 13-year highs. Your take on its move?
Sure. So the last time we spoke, I had told you that after many years of using a cliche line of mine that owning silver was like kissing your sister, because I'd always choose gold first over silver, I had turned quite positive on it. In fact, when it briefly went under 30 a couple months ago, that's when I'd said, it's time. The ratio has gotten too out of whack, and we're not surprised to see silver break this. Whether it was purposely manipulated, just people were selling it at a certain number, whatever it was, that it looked like it was going to go through this time, and that would elevate silver to probably lead gold for a while. And as you said, we've just done that. Today was a very healthy little consolidation after breaking that type of level. And I think that both metals are going higher. I do think, as I've said to you now for a few weeks, the longer gold can trade, maybe 3,000 as the low, and I don't even think that's coming now. I think that's kind of off the table. But use 3,000 to 3,500. The longer we would trade in that range, the higher we would end up going afterwards, because it would be a stronger foundation to build from. So I'm very, very bullish on the metals. Of course, as you know, several months ago, I kind of took physical bullion out as my first choice and started to go into mining shares. And then I went in the ultimate gamble, which is junior resource stocks. But all in all, physical metals, the mining shares, the junior resource market, all have their foot on the gas pedal, and it's forward as far as my eye can see at this moment.
Now, one of the things that's intrigued me over the last couple months here is that disconnect between gold and silver. I'm not a technical analyst, so I don't, look at the charts every single day and analyze all this, but it seems just by looking at the prices almost every day that we've seen a fundamental shift happen with respect to how gold and silver trade with respect to each other. Would you agree, or what is your take on that?
Yeah, I guess if we looked back, we would see certain periods that say almost 90% of the time, if gold was down that day, silver was. If gold was up that day, silver was. Now we've seen some days where one could actually be off and the other one up. We saw that a few days ago regarding the silver market. I think it's healthy that they both can take turns versus one dominating. There just tends to be, and you probably may see it in your end on the physical side, but there just tends to be silver to be more of an individual retail person, because they can have more quantity of it, where gold has been heavily purchased by central banks. I don't think, nothing that I've seen that we could talk about doesn't mean it's not happening, but I don't think central banks are hoarding silver in the same way that they've done these gold last few years. So I would commend silver in this regard, that if it is outperforming gold without that luxury of a huge, person that has tremendous deep pockets, it really attests the silver's recent strength is real and something to respect.
Now, I was just interviewing Clive Thompson, a retired wealth manager in Switzerland there, and he's noticing also, it seems like some people are actually buying platinum instead of gold now because of the price difference, and we've seen kind of a 20% increase over the last couple of weeks in the platinum price, now above 1,200. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. Going back to my days as a money manager, it was unheard of for gold to be priced above platinum. Platinum would always carry a premium and all. And, but it kind of, I guess because the main usage of it was always the catalytic converter and the electrification. And I don't know what took that away, and I don't know how much steel is used versus how it used to be in cars. I think the other concern, and one of the things I think why platinum has started to rise again, is the very fact that it's so low a price versus gold, but also one of the countries where you're most dependent on new platinum supply is really being torn apart, and that's South Africa. And then the other country, of course, is Russia. So there's a concern about future production ability because of where we just know that they're at. But I don't think the public is anywhere close to it interested in it as it was percentage-wise versus gold and silver 30 years ago. I think the public is front and center on gold and silver, and platinum sitting in the back seat. Nothing wrong with sitting in the back seat, but it's not the main thoughts of people when it comes to metals. Could that change? I don't think so. I just think right now, as you noted, as your guest had said, platinum's making up for lost time.
Now, you mentioned how really the big buyers are the buyers of gold. Central banks are buying gold, not silver, not platinum, really. Now, you have recently reported on your website, on your blog there, that there might be some changes in the BRICS alliance right now, which I thought was interesting because they're considering booting India from the alliance, which I believe it was India, right, that seemed to be kind of a bit cautious of dumping the dollar rate, of moving away from the US dollar. So what is your take on that potential change going forward?
Yeah, I think that comes to do regarding the trade war and how India has reacted to the United States and willing to work in the United States. I think India is being opportunist in the sense that they see themselves as somebody that could replace China for some of the things that China had offered on the World Trade Center. And the whole theory and reason behind BRICS is to move away from the dollar and the U.S. So if you're about openly saying, well, I want to embrace the United States more than I have been, then I can understand that transpiring. I don't think it's a blow to the BRICS, and I don't know how long that would last, because I think one of the things that is occurring, I fully expect Trump at when this is all said and done, I won, this is what I wanted, but the world did not beat a path to his door as he was touting from the day he was elected to the so-called Liberation Day. And I think the world has slow walked themselves dealing with him on the trade front. And while there will be an announced China agreement, China will be much more beneficial to that agreement than everybody was trying to say from the Trump's administration back in April. And therefore, I think the reasons on how the BRIC impacted the metals market, particularly gold, will continue. In fact, we know now there's a couple big meetings coming up regarding the BRICS, and there's already scuttlebutt of how they're working gold and the uses of gold into how they plan on trading with one another. And I think unlike 2 years ago when everybody, for whatever reasons, was saying, oh, they're going to announce a new gold converted coin and all that kind of stuff, I don't think that was ever on the table. But I do think by the end of this meeting that are coming up, we're going to have a fairly good idea what their plan is.
When it comes to de-dollarization, I mean, we're obviously seeing debt issues here in the U.S., and this is one of the crises that you've mentioned, we've gone over various crises that are all hitting at the same time with respect to the financial system and geopolitics here. But the U.S. debt situation, I think, is really critical as Trump is trying to push through this big, beautiful bill and this whole idea of cutting government spending kind of going to the wayside here. Do you have any thoughts on that and how maybe these BRICS nations might be reacting to that?
Well, I think what you just said at the end, if you just think about what it was like in the early days, you thought him and Musk were going to marry each other, and everywhere they were going, there where they were together. And, Musk was pointing that they're going to save $1 trillion here and $1 trillion. Trump beat his chest all with the deficit's gone. We found so many things, and we may even be able to pay off the government debt by the time we're done. And what's the end result as we speak? It's clearly that their relationship has been severed. None of those type of actual results occurred. A tripling of a few $1 billion of Doge cuts have come out of Congress, trying to get passed. And that is the big concern, bigger than ever, that the United States continues to amount unsustainable debt levels to the point of where interest payments could be questionable. And again, that's beneficial to gold. It's probably the second of 3 or 4 reasons why gold has gone from 1,300 to where it is now. The first was central banks buying in relations to BRICS and a change in the world. And then a second, alternative to U.S. debt. And now alternative to other debt. There's not a lot of people that want to put a lot of money in Japan right now. And they have an issue in their bond market. So gold is returning to what a lot of people like to make fun of, that got involved with crypto, was a relic, it's useless and all, but what it worked for a couple thousand years is doing it again. And that's the biggest selling point, that gold has a track record second to none. Now there's people talking about crypto and look what it's done for 10 years or 20. And hey, that's great. Don't get me wrong. It's great I doubt anybody had it at 100 still has it now, but it's great to say that there was that performance, but it hasn't even gone through a season yet, let it get a year. And, gold has a couple thousand years of history and track record and all. And I feel much, much safer with a gold than somebody telling me because something sits on a computer somewhere as I'm a rich man. I call me old fashioned, and they call me a lot worse than that, Elijah, from the crypto camp. But gold is doing what we always felt it should do. And now, of course, it's doing it very well.
How much of this move in the gold price do you think is also based on concerns regarding the economy? I know you've reported on jobs numbers not being very good and maybe overstated. What is your take on the state? Obviously there's the issues with the debt, but the U.S. economy in general right now.
Well, yeah, the employment numbers are false. I wrote a big piece about it over the past weekend, and I did an actual audio very rare for me because I wanted to make sure I said exactly what I felt. And it's just a farce of how they've come about it. And for a while we thought, well, it was just the Biden administration because they were hiding how really poor the economy was. And now for 4 straight months with our President Trump, we still had 4 employment numbers that end up being reversed the next month later and, of course, lowered. And we just saw that dramatically here. There's also been a great argument that I and some others had that the employment number is not as useful as the household number, because what happens is if I have to work 3 jobs now to keep my family going, and I work at company A, company B, and company C, in the employment number, when they go to and talk to the employer, well, there's 3 people working. That's 3 people working, but it's 1 person doing 3 jobs if you go to the household survey. And I think that's a better survey. And that actually saw a loss of almost 660,000 jobs last month. So I think, I don't trust the employment numbers. I think it's a lot worse than it really is. And then that rolls into, it's not a direct result to own gold, but then it rolls into, well, then that means it'd be tougher funding the deficit. If there's a problem funding with deficit, maybe you want to own gold and not U.S. Treasuries. That's how it plays into it. But I think that number, you'll be talking to somebody next month how they turn back this number by 50 or 60 or 70,000. And you know what? I think it's something like 16 of the last 18 employment numbers have been revised and revised down. Man, you wouldn't hire somebody to count your money if they counted, and miscounting that many times and be off by that much to the downside, not to the upside.
Right. I mean, it is shocking in some sense, and it just kind of reveals how a lot of these numbers maybe the markets react to, but they're manipulated in some sense. Even the inflation number, if you look at shadowstats.com, really inflation is probably a lot higher than the government says. So I guess going forward here, how do people live in the truth, right? If we're kind of in a fake economy, or the numbers that are coming out are really showing us not the truth.
Well, let's talk about that, because it happened last Friday, and an example of how the manipulation happens. First of all, anybody who thinks that inflation's been averaging only 0.2 to 0.3 of 1% a month for the last 5 or 10 years, I have a bridge to sell you cheap. I mean, anybody, it's you're living, whether you're paying whatever insurance you're paying, feed, food, clothing, medical, it's going up a lot more than that. So I think, be realistic, we kind of know that the inflation numbers are fudged by governments. But look what happens by the fudging. So I just talked about an employment number, which I believe and others believe was manipulated. Well, when they put out that news report at 8:30, not even 8:31, 8:30 and 15 seconds, there are computer algorithm programs that see the headline, employment beats. Well, the program is prayed as soon as you see that type of news, you buy S&P futures. So everybody says, why? I saw the S&P Peter, in a minute, they went up like 300-400 points. No human is going to chase a market that fast, that much, for whatever may be transpiring. But what does it do? It sets the tone for the day. The market went up. Now there's other programs that are program-based. If the market goes up so much, you buy, and it feeds on itself. And that's how they use manipulation. And my biggest concern about Trump, and I don't fall in either camp. I'm not a Magna. I don't have any Magna hats. My wife does. I don't. But I don't dislike the man. I don't think he's evil or anything of that nature. And there's some things he does that I like. But what he's done is he bet the farm that the stock market, which he'll always talk about, is, it's going to go through the roof. It's the best day. It signals how good he's doing or how well he thinks he's going to be. Even now, this money that they're going to propose to give to newborns and things of that nature. I'll tell you this much. I tell this to everybody. Don't watch the stock market. Watch the bond market. The bond market is so much more important and impactful to our lives than what the stock market does. Very rare that the stock market does something unusual up or down and the bond market reacts to it. It's not rare for the stock market to react to something that the bond market does up and down. And a country that's become so indebted and dependent on financing just to keep the lights on, so to speak, I'm more interested in, when I wake up in the morning, what did the bonds do? And where maybe the dollar be than before, what's the Dow Jones pre-opening figure?
Yeah, I think it's important, again, to live in the truth, right? And those real numbers, as you mentioned. So what do our viewers do in that case? And how do they position themselves financially? In your view, obviously, we can't give financial advice, but what are some of the steps people can take to really live in the truth rather than, maybe following the markets every day or following these government numbers that are really, in reality, not true?
I was going to tell you, turn off the TV and definitely don't watch regular news. If you want to try to live in the truth, I think there's a lot of untruths happening there. I think some of the basics you have to go back to. People always ask me, when you paint this dire picture, how can we overcome it? Well, first of all, I think it's going to take a generation, even if we started tomorrow. I won't see the fruits. You're young enough to see the fruits of a change if it is to occur. One of the things, I think it starts what I think is common sense. You have to live within your means. Your parents and your grandparents will tell you that this society has too much stuff. We depend on far more important things we think are, hey, is there a public storage place that I can put my extra stuff in? When our parents and grandparents didn't even know what public storage was. They had much smaller dwellings. They didn't have all the things we had. The other thing is it's simple math. You got to spend less than you make. And we don't do that as a society or as a country. We become a liver off of debt. And then I guess where you and I may separate ourselves from some others is both you and I, our Catholic Christian faith is critical to us. It's the foundation to our life. And I think if you're a Christian and even Jewish, because of so much of it in the Old Testament, there's not any positive verses about debt. And there's a lot of warnings about debt. In fact, people are shocked when you tell them that there's so much wording in Scripture about matters of finance, that there's even more verses than there are about heaven or hell. And so I think the other thing, as you said, to kind of live out from that is try to live a biblically filled lifestyle. And part of that is going against the tide now. This is a very unchristian-like or unfaithful-like country that while there is renewal in certain points and all, there is more people agnostic now or atheists than any other time in modern era. And I think that's not a coincidence, Elijah, why we have the problems that we have. It's not to say that I find Christ and all my issues are solved and I live happily ever after, but I do think we become and get based on some moral principles that have been lost. This relativism that seeps through all parts of society now is, hey, you can't, he or she wants to do that. They want to act in that way or act in a very poor way. It's no place for you to say and all. I think that's what got us into a lot of the issues that we have now. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is trying to live a life of faith with all these things that are happening, including the manipulation of government and all that type of et cetera, and to have enough trust and faith that no matter what happens here, this isn't all what it's all about. See, if you would put yourself for a second, Elijah, out of the mind frame that you've been blessed to be in and think about, well, there is no afterlife. There is no guy in the sky or anything like that. This is just it. It's not a lot to live for. You can see why some people might turn to, but to know that an opportunity for eternal and a peace that we will never really begin to appreciate. I like to say this, Elijah, I hope you don't mind me saying this. Your happiest day on earth will just be a minute second in heaven. And if that's true, if you believe that, then you should be doing everything you possibly can to get to that, because that's better than any other possibility thing you could think of. And I think that's what, helps at least me in the toughest days and gone through some of the toughest things that can happen in life, keeps you going. And I got to also say, if you don't mind, I know this recording, I think that's why you and I have developed our personal life, because we kind of have that in our ways. It's very rare that I would say that some of my best friends are agnostic or atheist. They're not. They're just not. There's not that commonality that brings us together. And that's why when people say to me, what should I do? I think it always goes back to the good book and start your work on the foundation of what that wonderful book, the greatest book ever written, read by more people, influenced more life than anything else, and start from there.
I think that's a really good parallel that you might be drawing here with respect to the financial system, right? You see the government really spewing lies in a lot of circumstances. You see that our money itself, right? Currency is counterfeit currency if you really think about it, because there's nothing to back it besides just the government. There's nothing real. So if you shift your finances in some sense over to something that actually is real, right? You start owning hard assets. You start, in a sense, living your financial life in the truth, right? And then when it comes to the most important thing, your spiritual life, if you're subscribing to these strange ideologies that are out there, these political parties that are out there, you're starting to kind of believe in fake religion, in a sense, counterfeit religion, but you really have to reorient your life to something real, right? To something, the Catholic faith that we share in common, right? To actually believe that, God created everything and created a plan for our life instead of subscribing to these man-made concepts. Did you want to maybe talk about that? I think there's definitely a parallel that can be drawn there.
I think you said it, that is, it's very hard for someone that hasn't embraced faith in a real way. It's one thing to say, yeah, I hear this all the time. I was raised Catholic. I never understood that was. I'm assuming you mean as a child, your parents practiced Catholicism, they took you to church, but since then, you haven't been to church or whatever and all. So you could say you were raised anything, you're not enacting what the faith calls about. And I have no problems with Christianity in general. I don't believe it's my job to tell anybody if it doesn't say a certain thing on that building, you believe you're going in there having a personal relationship for Christ. Who am I to tell you that's wrong? Okay. I think do you go to the basics? Do you go to the beginning? Do you believe in that there was a God and he created his only son to come? John 3:16, everybody knows or have heard that and so forth. That's the ultimate fundamental things to start with. Christianity has separated because they got caught up on the 10 to maybe 20% of different interpretations of a certain book and not focus on the 80 or 90% of the stuff that is in common. It's just like Great Britain and the United States. A lot of different cultural differences, but for a few hundred years, they managed to work together and all because they focused on the overriding things that they had in common. I think that's the first calling that we need to do. And the church has been broken because of that for hundreds of years now. But I think it's even more important to ask yourself this question. And by now, I could tell you, Elijah, those who are really anti-believers, they turned this interview off. Right. So, but on the odd chance that some of them have stayed. But I really think it's important to really start to ask yourself, what's your father may know and all. What's it all about, Alfie? That's a famous thing from the 60s of a play and all. What's it all about? Well, how did it start? Did really some atoms just get together and exploded and didn't exist, and that's why we are here? Or is it something much, much deeper and bigger than that? And if it is that, how much more is that could we even start to understand it all? Someone asked me, do you ever regret choosing what you've chosen to be and wear it on your sleeve like you do in my business? And I always give an answer that my best friend, who was actually a Catholic lay evangelist, used to give. He says, even if it's not true, it's still a better way to live. And there is a peace that comes from it. And part of that peace, by the way, is getting out of debt. I can't tell you how many people have been enslaved by debt and spending more and chasing the world goods and all that kind of stuff. If it was a matter of just simple wealth of accumulating dollars, you wouldn't read all the bad stories you do about entertainers and professional sports players and things of that nature getting into all sorts of trouble because they've been given enough money that the common person just dreams about having that and all. So what's it all about, Alfie? And I think that's what you have to come to the conclusion. And you're only going to be viewed three ways. You too, my young friend. Some are going to think we're charlatans. These guys are just talking like that because he can sell gold and he sells them stocks and all that kind of stuff. Then the other part of the group is, I don't care what that guy Elijah does. Can he make me money? And then there's the third group, which probably gives you the most satisfaction. Man, I'm glad I met you, brother. I'm really glad that you walk in that faith, and I appreciate it. And I too, and I love God. And that's it. And at this point in time in my life, I recognize it won't be the biggest group, but it will be the most peaceful group that we'll be part of.
Well, Peter, we really appreciate your time today and also your ability to share your faith as well on our channel here. If our viewers are interested in learning more and have a website that has a faith-based approach to really when you're looking at the financial system, they can go to petergrandich.com. Can you tell us a bit about this?
Sure. So petergrandich.com is the website. It explains what my one remaining business is, a financial planning group that focuses on cash flow, for success, not chasing net worth. I have a blog there, but my main focus of communicating is both the YouTube channel, where I'm blessed to put interviews like this, and also when the odd time that I get a chance to interview people such as yourself. And then the main focus of where I communicate is through my X page. And that is, obviously under my name, Peter Grandich.
Perfect. Well, Peter Grandich, thank you so much for your time today. God bless. And any last thoughts you had for our viewers?
Yeah, I can't thank you enough for allowing these last few minutes. I really enjoyed talking about the markets and metals, and always do, but the ability to share this, to think even if just one person now, Elijah, that watches this gets a change in life for the better, to understand and embrace the greatest gift of all, and that's the gift to recognize that we're a child of God. It's the greatest thing that we could have possibly done, and I thank you and your father for affording me this opportunity to do so.
Thank you so much, Peter. You have a great day, and God bless.
God bless you, my friend.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin weekly specials for June 9th through June 16th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we feature 1-ounce silver maples at just $3.09 over spot. Next, backdated 1/10-ounce gold maples at just $39.99 over melt. Next, the very limited 1-ounce Silver Engelhard Prospector rounds from 1982 to 1986 are just $4.79 over spot. And finally, 1-ounce Platinum Britannia are just $79 over melt. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.